The issue Post-it notes that you filled out as you came in, and I now have a board full of Post-it notes in back, so the questions will come from the issues that you determined were important to you, and we'll have some time for audience questions hopefully later in the program. I'll ask the questions from the top 3 or 4 issue areas, and then we're going to try to open it up to the audience. Candidates will have a minute each to respond to questions. When they respond, if time allows, we'll open up the floor for questions. As an added twist, each candidate has been given a gold card that they can use anytime, but only once, to give a 30-second rebuttal or response after another candidate gives their response. Just hold up your gold card, and I'll call on you to give your rebuttal. At around 7:40, each candidate will give a 1-minute closing statement. We'll try to adhere strictly to time limits tonight. Elizabeth is keeping the time, and we'll hold up her sign. She's got a timer right in front. She's sitting dead center, so all of the candidates can see, and they'll know when their time is up. So, if we can start going down the line with the introductions, the self-introductions, and if you would, as you introduce yourself tonight, could you also include a very brief statement on what drives you to run for your office? And we'll start with Marie Audette, candidate for the Senate from Bridgeport. Marie.
We don't need microphones today?
You have a microphone on the table,
okay,
and we'll pick you up.
All right. Well, I was born in Porter to newly immigrant parents, and I grew up on the dairy farm right next door to the hospital. I knew French only when I started school, so I remember being very scared and very lonely for quite a while, but as children do, I learned the language and moved on with things until I eventually fell in love with another farmer, or with a farmer, and also with his entire family, and it turns out that's a good thing because they seem to come as a package. Fast forward 40 years, Blue Spruce Farm has kept up with the tradition as far as being a family farm. We're now 4 generations, 20 family members, and 8 different homes. My happiest times are in the summers when every single room in my house is filled with family and grandchildren and their friends. What is not traditional is how we farm. We openly host many of you over the years and thousands from around the country and the world because we have something special here in Vermont, and I share that passion of quality of life here and our sense of community and our caring for each other.
Thank you, Marie. Incumbent Senator Chris Bray.
Good evening. My name is Chris Bray. It's a pleasure to see you all here this evening. I live with my family on a farm in New Haven, and I have served 5 terms in the Vermont legislature, 2 in the House and 3 in the Senate. I want to thank everyone for their past support. Because of that legislative service, I have a record, and I'm proud to run on that record. And the most important people in terms of judging it are you. But there are other people with expertise and experience in legislative matters and other areas that have endorsed me this campaign. So I want to just speak very briefly about some of those endorsements. For my general work as a legislator, I've been endorsed by Senator Patrick Leahy, Congressman Peter Welch, Governor Howard Dean, and Madeline Kunin. For standing up for regular working Vermonters, I've been endorsed by Bernie Sanders, AFL-CIO, VSEA, for standing up for schools, Vermont NEA, for standing up for Lake Clean Environment, Bill McKibben, Vermont Conservation Voters and Sierra Club, and last, Planned Parenthood of New England.
Peter Briggs.
I'm Peter Briggs. I'm a lifelong resident of Addison County and a 4th-generation dairy farmer. I'm a vice chair of the Addison Select Board, active member of the State Guard, and I love history and learning about government. Over the last 8 years, I've observed an unsustainable pattern of state spending outpacing revenue growth. Along with a declining labor force, but steadily increasing taxes and fees, placing an ever-increasingly heavy burden on Vermont's working citizens. sweeping state mandates covering vast areas of our lives, including energy policy, healthcare, and education, which have been built on questionable assumptions, but quickly adopted by the legislature, which has suffered from a lack of diversity in its perspective. Negative consequences have resulted in a loss of trust in this administration as well as the legislature. I'm running for the future and the future of all Vermont residents. I have the common sense, dedication, energy, and work ethic needed to make a positive difference in Montpelier.
Thank you. Archie Flower.
Good evening. Before I begin, I'd like to thank you all for coming and thank our hosts at the Addison County Chamber of Commerce and the Addison County Economic Development Corporation. My name is Archie Flower. I was born and raised in Middlebury, and I've lived in Addison County my whole life. I'm running for state senate to restore the proper relationship between government and the people. Montpelier has forgotten it should serve the people, as stated in Article 6 of our Constitution. Montpelier has forgotten. Article 6 clearly outlines government's only authority is derived from the people. Montpelier has forgotten its proper role as a protector of our individual, inalienable human rights. Being elected to the state senate is a position of public service and duty, not authority or rule. Please vote for me and help remind Montpelier of these facts. Thank you.
Thank you, Archie. Before we proceed to Ruth, let me just indicate to you that some folks are having trouble hearing you. So if you'll lean forward or if you want to move your microphone closer into you, that would be great. And now, Ruth Hardy, candidate for Senate.
Hi everybody, I'm Ruth Hardy and I live here in Middlebury with my family. It's great to be here in my hometown where many of you know me and know my work. As many of you know, I've served on the Mary Hogan School Board and the Addison Central School Board and working to bring new opportunities to students, ensure our schools are safe and inclusive, maintain budgets that are responsible, and lead our schools through a period of very difficult change. I have stood before you many times and demonstrated my deep understanding of policy and finance, my ability to explain complex issues, my desire to reach compromise and get things done, my political courage, and my humanity. I show up and work hard and listen and learn and do what's right for our community. I don't do this for personal or financial gain. I'm running for state senate because of this. I'm out in the community nearly every day, meeting people and learning about their lives. I'm fueling my campaign with individual donations and lots of creamies, and I'm running to represent you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Paul Ralston.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming. My name is Paul Ralston, and I am a small business owner here in Middlebury. I used to live in Middlebury, but just recently moved to New Haven. While I was living in Middlebury, I represented our community in the Vermont legislature in the House, served 2 terms with Betty Nuovo as my seatmate. I am running as an independent, and it appears that that decision has upset some people. And that's just the way it is. The great thing about our democracy is that you get to vote. Vote for me, don't vote for me. That is your choice. I'm running in the hopes of adding some new ideas, some new approaches, some independent thinking to how we run our state. I appreciate your support.
Thank you, Paul. Those are our 6 candidates for the Senate from Addison County. When you go to the polls, you'll be voting for 2 of those candidates. Now that you know who they are, we're going to proceed with questions for them. But first, let's mention that current Senator Claire Eyre is in the room. And I'd like her to stand just so we know that she is a part of this. Thank you for your service, Claire. We really appreciate it. Okay, we'll move on to the House races now. And if you'll bear with me, I'm going to skip around a little bit because I know that in the House we have 1 contested race and the rest are uncontested. So I'll go right to Peter Conlon first in the Addison 2 district and let him begin.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Peter Conlon. I'm a resident of Cornwall, where my wife and I have lived for 28 years and raised 3 sons, the last of which is a senior in high school here. I'm finishing my first term as a representative in the Addison 2 district, which includes Cornwall, Goshen, Hancock, Leicester, Ripton, and Salisbury. And I serve on the House Education Committee. I've had 3 careers during my time living here. I worked at the newspaper for 15 years. I worked in the dairy industry for 10 years. And now I'm a small business owner. But what's really nourished me is community service. From being part of the Cornwall PTO for 10 years to being on our unified school board, from coaching Little League to serving on the fire department. That sense of community service is really what drives me to serve in the House, and it's a great honor to be able to serve 6 very different rural communities around Middlebury.
Thank you, Peter. Peter is running uncontested in the Addison 2 district. So when they say vote for one, currently he is the candidate in that district. And I'm going to move on to the other, what I call uncontested district, Addison 1 in Middlebury, and ask Robin Shy to go next.
Thanks very much. Thank you all for coming, and thanks to all of you for hosting this event. I'm Robin Shy. I've lived in Middlebury for a little over 26 years. I raised my 2 children here, and now I have a 2-year-old grandchild. I have just finished my first term in the House, and I have served on the House Corrections and Institutions Committee there. I was also appointed to the Government Accountability Committee, which is a joint committee with the House and the Senate that meets off session. I'm also a member of the Vermont Climate Solutions Caucus and the House Rural Economic Development Working Group. I also done a few community service things in Middlebury and Addison County in the state. I was also a past chair of the Maricopa School Board and chair of the United Way of Addison County, and retired last year as executive director of the Addison County Economic Development Corporation. I am running because I want a Vermont and an economy that works for all of us, not just a select few.
Thank you, Robin. Amy Sheldon.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here. Thanks to the folks who are watching on TV and to the sponsors. My name is Amy Sheldon. I currently represent Middlebury in the Vermont House along with Robin. We're a 2-seat district. I am running for my 3rd term in the House, and I currently serve on the Commerce and Economic Development Committee, but I have previously served on Fish, Wildlife, and Water, and Agriculture and Forestry committees. I am Vice Chair of the Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules in the House, and also currently chairing the Act 250, the next 50 years Summer Study Committee. In my work here in the community now, I actually work on, the clock's distracting me, excuse me. I work with the Climate Economy Initiative, and also serve on the Middlebury Conservation Commission. When I'm not doing legislative work, I'm an environmental consultant and an instructor with the National Outdoor Leadership School.
Thank you, Amy. Amy and Robin are running uncontested in the Addison 1 district. There'll be 2 candidates. Vote for 2 when it's time to vote. And now to the contested district, Barbara Wilson is running for the Addison 1 race.
Addison Rutland 1?
Addison Rutland.
We can't forget that.
Okay, Addison Rutland 1. You can go first.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. As representative for Benson, Shoreham, Orwell, and Whiting, I will work to make sure that we focus on the critical issues that many of our residents are facing today. I grew up on a dairy farm, worked for 36 years managing and building software systems, and now retired to a small fruit and berry farm. I understand the struggles that our farmers are faced with. I also understand how difficult it is for our families to get started, to make enough money to survive. For many, health insurance and childcare are not options. They simply can't afford either one. Based on 110 surveys I've received back so far, affordable health care and childcare are among the highest priority concerns. Based on my extensive business, experience, and work ethic, I will be transparent, fiscally responsible, and cost-aware when working on state budget items.
Thank you, Barbara. Terry Norris is the incumbent. Terry?
I'm Terry Norris. I've lived in Shoreham for close to 60 years. I had a dairy farm with my brothers up until 2008 when we sold the farm. And I've been a professional photographer for close to 20 years. And presently I work on the Fort Time Ferry as captain and deckhand. I've served our Addison Rutland district for the last 2 years on the Ag and Forestry Committee. I feel with my farm background that I understand exactly what farmers are going through right now, and I hope to make a difference in their lives.
Thank you, Terry. The Terry Norris and Barbara Wilson are running in the Addison Rutland 1 district, and you'll be voting for one of them when you go to vote. So we'll move on now to the questions that you posed, and by far, let me tell you that the healthcare issue is the #1 issue tonight. More than 20 people mentioned it on their sticky notes, so that's where we're going to start, in healthcare. And we'll start with the House candidates first and talk to the Senate candidates a little bit later. The question, of course, is all about primary universal health care, and what is it, and how does it operate, and what will it do for us? And I'm going to start with Barbara Wilson.
Thank you. 60% of the surveys that I have had returned have highlighted healthcare as the top priority. Instead of focusing on what cannot be done, we must start focusing on what we can do. By moving to universal primary care in Vermont, we could cover every single Vermonter, regardless of their current coverage, for an average cost of a primary care visit for the year. This would include primary care, mental health, and substance abuse. This also takes into account the fact that people would use it more than they do today. It would ultimately save money by treating many illnesses before they become catastrophic, requiring a visit to the ER and hospitalization. It would be a starting point for simplifying the administrative costs for the primary care doctor and would attract more primary care doctors to Vermont. This is absolutely something that can be done in Vermont while we are waiting for Medicare for all.
Thank you. Amy?
Yeah, thank you. So healthcare was one of the major reasons that I chose to run for the House 4 years ago, and it's still obviously a primary driver of the cost of our schools and our government services. And then just this week, a study actually came out indicating that businesses are really still struggling with the cost of healthcare. And many of us, and including myself, I get healthcare through, because I'm a small business owner, don't even have that good of care still. We've done a lot. We're moving into this all-payer model. We're working on reducing costs. And I definitely support the move to primary care. Barb did a great job describing what it includes, so I won't go into that now. So I support the move to primary care for all until, as Barb said, we get Medicare for all. Thanks.
Before we continue, there was a comment that was given to me regarding referring to health care or health insurance. Health care, you already get good health care, it says. What you're talking about is the cost of health insurance. Not health care. Don't the doctors give a good free health care? So Robin, with that, you're next.
Nothing confuses I don't. All right, so I'm on ready.
Okay, yes.
So I do believe that all Vermonters should have access to affordable quality health care. I don't believe that all Vermonters have that now. Even when there's quality, if they can't afford it and they can't go to the doctor, it doesn't really matter whether it's a good quality if they can't show up to the doctor. I absolutely support the national level of medical care for all. Agree with both what Amy and Barb have said. We've been trying to get a study done to see how we can realistically fund universal primary care. I'm all in favor of universal primary care. I talked to a doctor over the weekend. In the long run, it's going to save money and in healthcare and also result in healthier families. And he told me that one visit to a primary care physician is the cost of 10 visits to an ER. So I believe there's really significant savings in there. And when you free up the emergency rooms for what they should be. Did I say it backwards? One visit to a primary care physician costs the same as 10 visits to
One visit to the ER.
10 visits to the ER costs the same as one visit to the It's 10 times more expensive to do. At any rate, you get what I'm saying, and that's why I'm here.
Thank you. Terry?
In my conversations with Board of Medical Centers President Dr. Niffen, he indicated that the all-payer model was working as it was anticipated, and we should give it a few more, another year or two to find out if it's actually going to do what it's intended to lower health care costs and keep patients healthier. And I've looked into the universal health care. I think if it were a national plan, we could probably do it, but as Vermont, we just are not a wealthy enough state to do it on our own. Thank you.
Peter?
I'm a supporter of universal primary care for all, for all the reasons Barb said, as well as it being a bridge to hopefully, ultimately, Medicare for all nationally. I think what we wish we could have for Vermonters is exactly what I wish we could have for everybody in America. In addition to the reasons everybody else talked about, what we found, I think, a little bit with the Affordable Care Act, but I think even more if we could go to universal health care, it would free people up from being tying their lives to their health insurance, and can really, I've always thought of it as a pro-business move, as it would unleash people's ability to be entrepreneurial, to develop the businesses they've always had in their heads, because they will no longer have to be tied to a job that is tied to their health insurance. It's a big issue for me, as we just found out today. My son has to have his wisdom teeth out for $3,000 to $5,000.
Okay, thank you, Peter. I'm going to double back down the representatives since we're on this topic before we go to the senators, the Senate candidates, I should say, and ask one more question that's on the list. And maybe you can do it quickly. I don't know, but we'll give it a try. The question is, do you support negotiating a single statewide health care contract for teachers? Peter? You start at your end and we'll come back down.
So the answer to that, especially now that all parties are on board, yes. I'm a school board member and currently on our negotiations committee. Negotiating a contract for a lot of people is a challenging process, and one of the hardest parts is healthcare. And what I see as a benefit, not just to sort of the challenges that school boards face in negotiating healthcare, I think equity across the state, so that all of our public school employees are treated the same when it comes to healthcare, which is really one of the fundamental parts of a contract, I think would benefit everybody on all sides.
Thank you. Terry, how do you feel about that? Single statewide healthcare contract for teachers?
Yes, I think it's a great idea.
Okay.
Every teacher in Vermont should have the same insurance.
Rob?
Chittenden County shouldn't have more.
I'm just going to
Yes, and we voted to support that last session, and for all the reasons Peter talked about.
And Amy?
Yes, I voted to support that last year.
And Barbara?
I didn't vote for it because I wasn't there, but it sounds like it was the right thing to do.
Okay. All right, now we can move on to the Senate candidates and go back to our basic question about health care. Where are you with that, with the universal primary care issue? And we'll start with Paul Ralston.
Thank you. Yes, so the distinction between healthcare and the cost of it and the insurance in order to afford that cost is really the issue. When I served in the House and I was there, we pursued, Ellen Oxfeld, who's here, was the champion of the single payer model. And we went down that path. I voted for every single one of those pieces of the plan. And we spent, I think, was it over $200 million of taxpayers' money trying to do it alone in Vermont. Now, it wasn't Vermont taxpayers' money, it was federal taxpayers' money, and somehow that made it feel easier to spend the money. But of course, that was all our taxes as citizens. So I would love to see, I turned 65 in July, so I actually qualified for Medicare, so I'm already ahead. And it would be great if we had a system like that for all Vermonters that we could afford.
Ruth?
Thank you. Yes, I am supportive of publicly financed universal primary care for all the reasons that Barb has laid out, and also Amy and Robin and Peter. I think it's the right thing to do because when we're sick, we need to be able to go to the doctor. 15 years ago, I was the executive director of the Open Door Clinic, which is a free healthcare clinic for people who don't have insurance. And I saw what happens to people when they don't have access to good healthcare. There's a difference between having access to good health care and just having health insurance. And we need to ensure that everybody in our state has access to good health care, regardless of how we pay for it. Paying for universal primary care, we're already paying for care in many budgets, our personal, our private, our public budgets already. So we need to move to universal primary care, and we can do it because we have smart people in the legislature, like hopefully those of us sitting up here who are in favor of it. So thank you.
Archie?
Before I begin, how well can you hear me? Good. Are we good? Okay. We've certainly heard mostly one philosophy from all of these candidates. And I don't disagree with their goals. I think quality, affordable care is something we all share as a goal, but I have a different view of how to get there. If you want to build a bridge, you ask a civil engineer. You consult the laws of physics. If you want to do something with the economy, you need to talk to an economist. And all of this interference with the market of healthcare is counterproductive to the goal of quality, affordable care. In every market, globally, and in every market historically, the freer the market, the higher the quality products, the greater supply of products, and the lower the prices.
Peter?
As far as a universal primary care system goes, I would question how well can Vermont afford it this time of the year that we had a $65 million surplus and taxes still went up. I question how well overtaxed Vermonters might be able to afford this. What I'd like to see for a different direction is more choices. Right now we have two pretty much choices for health care coverage and MVP and Blue Cross. If we had more options, you could find more things that would work for more people. Also, you have some options for hospitals depending on how far you want to go, but more options there also could help. Right now there's a lot of money that's spent on middlemen, whether it goes to the bureaucracy that has to process all the paperwork that the hospitals have to go through to get money from the insurance company, or whether it's the people on the other end of the insurance company that has to process all the paperwork that the hospital puts to them. If we were able to direct that more directly with the purchaser being able to go to the hospital and get care, it would cut a lot of that out.
Chris?
I do support universal primary care, and S53, which is a bill that was proposed to do just that, I sponsored last session. Stepping away from Vermont just for a second, it's worth reminding ourselves that every other industrialized country in the world supplies health care as a right to all its citizens. In the United States, we spend twice as much per capita as other countries on average, and we rank 37th in world health ratings. So we are spending a lot, and we're ending up with poor care. Why is that? It's because the money isn't flowing around to deliver the services that we want and that we're already actually paying for. So universal primary care in Vermont is we have an old expression, a stitch in time saves 9. Primary care keeps you from needing to be hospitalized or go on to see specialist care. It's cost effective. We've done effective and innovative programs like Dr. Dinosaur for ourselves. We can do the very same thing with universal primary care.
Thank you. Marie?
So as a small business for the last several decades, we've always paid for our health care for our employees. And I remember when Claire came in my office and she was trying to talk about this universal, we have to share the cost. And she really made me believe that if we all shared the cost, it would be spread among a lot of people and it would do better. And what ended up happening, and I'm really scared of this continuing to happen, is we lost the health care that we had because it was from an out-of-state agricultural company. And it's gotten so expensive, more and more every year. So currently we're still striving to provide it for our employees, and it's very expensive. I have Canadian relatives that have that kind of universal health care, and they're not happy with it. When they have emergencies, they often have to go private. So I'm really cautious about it. I want it, and if we can do it and be fiscally responsible, I'm all in. But I'd have to make sure how it's funded.
Thank you. In amongst the questions about healthcare was one about the opioid crisis. Does anyone have a solution to the crisis? Paul Ralston?
Don't we all wish we had a solution? So first, I think our current legislature gets credit for appropriating some serious money towards this issue. Last year, I think it was not even $14 million. Someone will know, but it is recognized as a very serious situation. It crosses medical, sociological, demographic, geographic issues. It's complex. Addiction is a terrible thing, and there are parts of addiction that have to do with hopelessness, and not all. Some people may get addicted from a doctor's prescription, but hopelessness is something that needs to be addressed. Loneliness needs to be addressed. So community can have a huge impact. A good job can have a good impact. Not being afraid or worried about your financial situation all the time can have a big impact.
Thank you, Ruth.
Yes, I think I don't have the solution to the opioid crisis, but I think one thing we need to do is start with prevention and education to make sure that we prevent people from becoming addicted to opioids in the first place. And this includes prevention and education of students and also medical providers to make sure that they are not providing medication that is unnecessary and addictive. We need to approach the crisis from a position of harm reduction and know that addiction is an illness, it's not a crime. We need to make sure we have local access to medically assisted treatments, and these are improving in Addison County, and we're making great strides in this. And also access to counseling and counseling services for people who have been addicted to opioids. And we need to make sure that we have community-based supportive housing for people who are addicted or have been addicted and need to transition into a healthier life so that they can be supported through their housing in this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Archie, do you have a solution?
I do not have a direct solution per se, but I do have some comments. I like what Paul said about the fact that community can come together socially and help, make that connection neighbor to neighbor and help people feel less hopeless, because that's what mostly drives these things. That they're not looking to become addicted. They're not looking to ruin their lives. They're just feeling, lost and confused, and they need to have some kind of connection. And I think that neighbor to neighbor, we can make those connections. On a governmental level, one of the biggest things we can do is help reduce economic pressure and just get regulations out of the way of business people, and that'll help create jobs. It'll help, you know, let people not feel hopeless.
Thank you, Archie. Peter?
Trying to save someone from the consequences of the decision has been one that people have been trying to find an answer to for a long time, and I'm not sure that we ever will, but I think a better approach that we could take, one that we have been trying in some ways, is trying to prevent people from making those poor choices. So doing things like getting more businesses here and give people good jobs so then they have something good to live for could be very beneficial. Also, trying to make sure that it's clear that people who bring in drugs illegally, who take advantage of people who are less fortunate through these different systems, is not welcomed or tolerated. And it's going to have to be also at the community level. I mean, nobody can do it all in Montpelier. It's very important that everybody, family, neighbors work together to help these people.
Chris?
As Peter just said, it can't just come from Montpelier. I'm pleased to have voted for $14 million extra money to support projects, but those projects are rolled out at the community level. And we really need an integrated package and we are learning as we go. So it starts with prevention and education. For instance, in 75% of teens who go on to become addicted started with a prescription. Then we need to have effective distributed treatment programs throughout the state that are readily available without waiting lists. Then we need to follow up with a longer-term investment in recovery. So reintegration into community, where you have access to counseling, you have stable housing, you have proper nutrition, health care, and opportunities to train and integrate back into the workforce. It's that complete cycle that we need to address. There are no shortcuts on the opioid epidemic, and we need to be steady and work towards a complete solution.
Thank you, Chris. Marie?
So I don't disagree with anything, and as a matter of fact, I strongly agree with everyone's comments so far. You know, especially the education piece, because I know how I was affected in junior high here when the police came and told us about drugs and let us see them and told us, and we read books about them, and that I've never done any drugs, and you know that's when it's effective, is when you're young and you can be prepared for when it comes your way. I'm really happy that the legislature made it such a priority, because that's number one. You have to prioritize these things, and that's what set the stage so that we're going to get to the bottom of this. I think we're going to get through this. I'm hopeful.
Thank you, Marie. We'll move to the House candidates, and Barbara.
Okay. As everyone else, I believe that we need to focus on prevention as well. Thank goodness we've been focusing on this as a state, but the cost associated with prevention is really a fraction of treatment. And for each person that doesn't become an addict, it will save us thousands of treatment dollars. Once someone is then addicted, it actually alters their chemicals in their brain, so they have to live with this the rest of their lives. So if we can prevent our children from becoming addicted in the first place, then they won't have to live with that and go through treatment. So what I believe we need to do is really get into the schools and expose children not only to education about drugs, but also things that help build up their self-esteem, make sure that if they have depression, that they have treatment, such as through universal primary care, so that it doesn't become an issue.
Thank you. Moving on to Amy.
A lot of great stuff has been said already about prevention and education. I totally support all of that. I think it's great to also just look back at and Marie brought this up a little bit, the model that Peter Shumlin just stepped it up. He realized this was an epidemic in our state, and it's impressive because in the years since he did that, we have made great progress. The hub and spoke model that we instituted is something that other states are looking to help them solve their crisis. The other thing I think is Attorney General T.J. Donlan right now with the suit against the pharmaceutical companies is also on the mark. The pharmaceutical companies are driving a lot of the healthcare costs that we are really trying to wrap our hands around. And if we can send a message to them that this is no longer a way to operate and it's actually not ethical, that's really important. So I think that's what I have to add.
Robin?
I pretty much agree with what everybody else has been saying too. I wanted to add just a couple of other things on the side of working with people who have substance abuse disorder. First of all, we need to treat it as a public health crisis, not a crime. But in corrections, in my committee, we put together a bill and passed something that the governor signed to provide MAT, medication-assisted treatment, to anybody in a corrections facility in Vermont or out of Vermont, Vermonters who needed it for as long as it was medically necessary. It's had a bit of a rough start, but the intent is to treat everybody for as long as they need it, which once their brain is chemically changed, which can happen, as Barb mentioned, can be the rest of their life. So that's really important. And I think on the front end, you also have to look at inequality and the effect that not having good wages, not having paid family leave, not having housing, not having minimum wage affects people's stress and their lives. It's all tied up.
Terry?
I agree with everything that's already been said. You can't say too much more about it. But at the State House, we have, there's lots of people that come in and promote their programs. There was one that I was really impressed with. I'm going to say it might be Phoenix House, but they actually moved the addicts into their houses. There's like, I think 15 rooms or something, and they treat them from the beginning. It takes about a year and a half. First thing they do is work on their faith to build their self-esteem, and they work through the whole process of getting their education and actually finding them a job, and they can stay right there. And I was surprised. I asked him, I said, well, you know, what do you want from us? And he did not want anything. No money from the state. They got all their money from donations. So I think there's treatments out there.
And Peter?
Thank you. One of the most meaningful times at the legislature this past year was meeting two young men who seemed very well spoken, became very dressed, and gave some powerful testimony. And both of them had been prescribed opioids for medical conditions when they were teenagers, just teenagers. And they both the prescription had continued, and then when they got cut off, they realized they were addicted and turned to heroin. And they were both heroin addicts, now in recovery. And they said that they felt very fortunate to be in Vermont because we have addressed this and taken it on as a health epidemic, which is really what it is. And we have implemented some good strategies. Unfortunately, we are building a cycle. We now have many home lives that are disrupted by this epidemic, and it is now turning into adverse childhood experiences for the kids. And we really need to continue to press with the pedal to the metal on this issue in Vermont.
Thank you. We by no means are getting to the depth that all these questions have. We'll not have time for all of them tonight, but we're going to skirt around to the next issue, and that is the economy. That got a lot of votes tonight, what we wanted to talk about, and that includes talking about jobs and the very, very low unemployment rate in the state of Vermont, what that means, and minimum wage and benefits. All of those things rolled into one. How are we going to solve the problem and improve the economy and help everybody rise? And we'll start with Barbara.
So one of the things I learned going door to door is that there's many people that really want to stay here in Vermont, younger people, but they don't feel like they have the skills to do so, nor can they afford to get those skills. So I think we need to focus on job skills and put the same emphasis on job skills, trade skills, as we do on sending kids and pushing them to go to college. And I think we need to start that at a very young age so that children get confident of doing things with their hands and exploring things so that they have the confidence to try it. I watch my dad do things and I will try things, right? So I think that'll make a big difference if in fact we can really focus in our schools more so and have internships, apprenticeships, and enable kids to go into jobs that actually pay a decent wage.
Okay, we'll go right down the table.
That question kind of went on though.
I just said
Just an umbrella.
It was an umbrella.
Umbrella on economic development.
Economic development. And the specifics, I know a lot of folks want to talk about specifics of the minimum wage and benefits and all of the things that go along with that discussion. So you're free to move it where you want.
Great, thank you. So I had quite an adventure this year on House Commerce and Economic Development, and I got so excited by a lot of the initiatives that are going on already in the state of Vermont that we can support. We have a great example in Addison County with the Makery Space, which is looking to use the Hannaford Career Center for our Middlebury Makery. There's a more advanced in time Makery in Burlington and in Rutland, so we can look to them and see how they've done it. But this is a space where multiple generations can access the tools they need to develop the ideas they have and share skills and experience. And it's, to me, such a great example of the way people can take charge of building our economy and making it stronger. I was involved with the Addison County Economic Development Corporation after I got elected. I wanted to learn more about what was happening in that realm, and the focus on our youth also translates well into some of the things Barb said, and that's a place we've dropped the ball, and we need to find a way to pick up the 16 to 24-year-olds who are from Vermont and want to be in Vermont and get them working on the climate economies, where I would take it if I had more than 1 minute.
Robin?
Sure. So there are lots of jobs that are available in Vermont and they're going unfilled. Employers can't find the people that they need. There was actually an article in the paper which I found hopeful or on the news 2 days ago, that said that more and more employers, because they are having trouble, they're actually looking to hire people with developmental disabilities and people that are generally hard to employ, and they're willing to train them. And I think that's a really good thing for our communities when more people can get jobs. Totally agree with more job training, better use of our career and technical centers. Hannaford, in addition to the Makery, they have this new mentor program that they're starting, I guess that's at the Makery. And so that's a good thing. Peter had earlier talked about decoupling healthcare, and I think that would help from employers, and that would also help. If people aren't going to go to work if they can't find childcare, they can't get paid family leave, if they can't make enough money because it's too expensive with childcare. So all of those are a package that are going to make a difference in the economy.
Terry?
It's certainly a big problem. I think vocational centers are very important. I would like to see a few more of them. There's so many skills that we need just to survive. Then, like, say you want to call a plumber. It's not always easy to get a good plumber. And there's lots of ways for the vocational centers to do this. I think one of the big impacts on the economy is lack of early child education. I've just heard from one person that said they cannot find an early child care education person for their child, and it's going to be $55 a day. And I just can't imagine how that can be profitable for them.
Peter?
You can put me down as another vote for affordable quality childcare as a driver for the economy. I will say, from personal experience on the school board, we just got a 45% increase in our school busing contract. And it was largely in order to bring the pay up of bus drivers and to be able to attract and keep bus drivers. And we seem to be at a point in Vermont where actually the pressure of such a low unemployment rate is at last starting to push up wages. And hopefully, as those market forces continue, we will be able to retain more people here. But we simply lack people. And it is hurting us in that somebody who might want to start a business, expand a business, bring a business to Vermont, will look at that and say, well, if I can't get the people I need, how am I going to have a successful business? So between childcare and affordable housing, these are two of the most important things that we can use to address this.
And the Senate candidates will start this time with Marie.
So since I announced I was running for Senate, what I keep hearing over and over and over is affordability. And on every end of the spectrum, whether you're a young family or you're someone that's looking to retire. I would love to talk specifically on the birth to 5 education piece. Paul and I have been spending an awful lot of time figuring this thing out. And if we get elected, that's going to be one of our priorities because it's too important to leave behind. But the other thing that we always need to remember is we need healthy businesses. We need to attract the businesses because it's the businesses that are providing the paychecks. And I'd like to, one of the reasons I'm motivated to run is I don't think there's enough people that are business-minded in the legislature to round out these discussions. And I think that that's a strong voice that can be an advocate and really contribute to it all. There's so many jobs that are available and so many jobs that can be filled if we train through vocational direct to the job.
Thank you, Marie. Chris?
I'd like to talk a little bit about jobs that I've helped create while I've been in, because the pattern we're on is can be built out for years to come. So I started, for instance, our state's Farm to Play program, which has expanded agriculture and the notion of what we grow and harvest for food. That's led to 842 new businesses in the state, 7,700 jobs, and over $100 million in new revenue. On the clean water economy that I've been working on with others, there's a major opportunity in terms of building out that clean water infrastructure that was conservatively estimated at $1.2 billion. That's many Vermonters working for decades to come. And on the clean energy economy, in other words, clean generation, such as solar, weatherization, and efficiency, we've added 18,800 Vermonters make some or all of their living in that sector. They're getting paid good wages. And all these things are environmentally sound and a good economy. We have a large opportunity ahead of us to grow them further.
Peter?
If putting an increased tax on fossil fuels shrinks the use of them, then increasing the tax on the economy would likely shrink it also. In 2014, Vermont was $9 short of collecting $1,000 more for taxes per individual than Massachusetts. And Massachusetts has almost a $15,000 more median income during that same time period. If businesses are not able to keep the money they make, then they definitely cannot pass it on to their employees, which is going to be necessary with the low unemployment. There's going to be a lot of pressure to increase wages, especially with a million person shortage across the nation for jobs. So taxing is very important. Since Montpelier has tried to tax and spend its way into prosperity, nobody I know has been benefited from it.
Archie?
As the saying goes, the road to the proverbial hot place is paved with good intentions. And no matter the nobility of those intentions, when you introduce market distortions, when they try to run businesses from Montpelier, it actually creates more problems than it solves. We need to lower taxes, lower regulations on our businesses so that business people can actually run their businesses. Government's job isn't to run business, it's to make sure that people are not violent, and it's to make sure that people are not breaking their contracts or their word. And that's really all government needs to do. The rest of what we as a society want to do can be decided by individuals acting on a voluntary basis. And this can be seen in the free market, and this can be seen outside of the market, but it's not government's place to do any of that.
Ruth?
So a lot has already been said, and I just wanted to pick up on a couple things. First of all, what Robin brought up first about childcare. I've talked to a lot of people who are not able to find good jobs and keep good jobs because they don't have access to childcare, including infant and toddler care that's affordable for families. So the other thing is, and including paid family leave for people who have new babies or a relative to take care of. I also wanted to pick up on what Peter Conlon said about wages. A lot of people think it's a jobs problem, but it's actually a wage problem, that people are not paid an affordable living wage and are not able to access things, and a lot of jobs go unfilled because the wages are too low for them. I want to talk about what Senator Bray said, and playing to our strengths here in Vermont, our green economy, our food economy, our recreation economy, and also debunk the assumption that all businesses are the same. There are lots of diverse businesses and diverse solutions to what makes those work. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul?
So I actually know a little something about this. I've been an entrepreneur and an employer in Vermont for over 40 years. And I've worked with lots and lots of people. And the absolute thing that I've learned that all of us want, it's a good job close to home. And if you break that down into the three parts, the good job, I'm afraid, isn't a wage issue, it's a skill issue. We mentioned before. Any and every employer in Addison County is looking for employees. We have to steal them from each other because there are not enough people with skills to do those jobs. The affordable home is key, and the affordable home has to be near the job. And the commute, living in Vermont and having to drive to Chittenden County, it's a real shame.
Thank you, Paul. We're at the halfway point, and we're going to give our candidates just a 2-minute break so they can stand up for just a moment. You might want to do the same. We'll take a 2-minute break and then come right back.
No beer?
I'd like to make it a short question, and I'd like to limit it to 30 seconds for each candidate that's up here. The question is, do you support a $15 minimum wage? I'd like to just go right down the table and limit you to 30 seconds each, if that's possible. And we'll start with Barbara.
So as a small business owner, I realize how hard it is to pay people $15 an hour. Right now I pay people $12, $13 an hour. But I also understand that in order to live and survive in Vermont, you do need to make that amount of money. So I do support a $15 an hour increase on a gradual basis as been laid out. So I believe it's 2024 that we would finally reach that goal.
Thank you. Amy?
Yes, I do support increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour over time. In fact, I voted for it this year. I do think it's a wage issue, actually. When I talk to folks in Chittenden County about housing development, why can they build housing up there? And the answer is that people can afford it because they're making better wages. So we need to work on bringing the bottom up.
Robert?
Yes, also supported the bill to be passed to gradually increase the minimum wage. And I think that doing so will support families and boost spending in our communities, create jobs, and help our communities thrive. And I also think it's a really tiny step to start to address the inequality that's deeply affecting our state and our nation.
Terry?
During this last session, I voted against the minimum wage. I just did some research and I found that Vermont actually has one of the highest minimum wages in the country right now. And we aren't any better off for that. We're still struggling, so I don't know that having a minimum wage is going to really be an end all. Everything is going to be more expensive. You have to pass that cost on to your products.
Peter?
I do support the 6-year gradual phase-in of a $15 minimum wage. I think that the people who are at that end of the wage scale tend to spend their money locally. The It tends to recirculate, and I think it has benefits beyond just the wage earner.
Paul?
So obviously the right answer is to say I support the $15 minimum wage. I think the responsible answer is to say it's a lot more complicated than that. I know for a fact that the businesses that can afford 15 and more dollars an hour are paying that because they are competing for employees.
Ruth?
Yes, I do support the phased-in $15 minimum wage. I believe there was even more work done over the summer on the bill that was vetoed last session. I also support targeting increases in the minimum wage to certain employers or employees, including frontline healthcare workers and also childcare workers and mental health care workers. Those people are working on the front lines and they're gravely underpaid, and I think that the focus should be on them first.
Archie?
The fight for 15, why not the fight for 30, 45, 90, 180? The reason is because prices convey information on productivity and scarcity. And if we just arbitrarily set a price, that's actually introducing a form of fraud into the market. And it's a fraud that will swamp out small businesses. And most of our business here in Vermont is small businesses.
Thank you, Archie. Peter?
I'm not one who favors the government putting unions out of business by mandating things that they can negotiate for, so no, I don't. Another point that's very serious for us is we hire 3 teenagers on our farm. Of course, being a teenager on a farm is not a very long-term proposition, but it's an important one for them because they're learning a lot of different skills, and because we don't have to pay them $15 an hour to start with, we're able to afford to hire them and give them those skills, to train them. If we didn't have that, we wouldn't be able to give it to them, and they wouldn't be able to go on to a better job when they graduate.
Chris?
I have supported our past minimum wage increases, and I also voted for the $15 minimum wage increase. And that's because I feel that when you work a 40-hour week, it should bring a certain measure of dignity and security to you. If you're willing to work full-time hard, that you shouldn't be just scraping to get by. A $15 minimum wage phased in over a period of 6 years is something we know how to do. We've done it with the current minimum wage phased increase. It'll be healthy for those workers. It'll be stronger for our local economy.
Marie?
So like Paul, I say I'd like to see everyone have $15 minimum wage, but what I always think is missing from this is the businesses. They're your friends, they're your neighbors, they're people. And they're all struggling to do the very best to keep their employees and to pay them and give them the benefits. And I really feel that part of the conversation. I always feel like businesses are thought of as bad, but they're good, we need them, or else no one has a paycheck.
Thank you very much. That was great. Did a good job of keeping it down. At this point, we'd like to see if there's some folks in the audience that would like to step forward and speak into the microphone and ask their own question if I haven't already asked it. If you want, you need to come into to the microphone and get in line if you want. And we can say your name first and ask your question.
Hi, my name is Zula. I'm from Middlebury. Good coffee, by the way. I taught in a very small school in the Upper Valley. I had a student class size of students, 2 students. 2 students. When I tell colleagues and students alike this was a situation, they get a little upset because they never had that. So I want to know, all right, that school probably should have consolidated long ago. So I would like to hear what the candidates, how they feel about school consolidation, and that if they're opposed to it, then I'd like that class with just 1 student.
Okay, school consolidation, and we'll start with Peter and go this way.
I like to use the word unification. It's a process we went through here, and I think it has been serving us well. It allows us to think as a broader community and to really think about student needs and what works best for students. So I'm in favor.
Terry?
I'm in favor. In Shoreham, we voted to consolidate. I know one of our towns, Orwell, is having a very contentious problem with the whole thing. That's kind of a town problem that I don't think it has anything to do with whether consolidation is going to work or not. I think the whole reason we're consolidating is to lower the cost of education, and it's going to take probably at least 5 years before we see the results of that.
Robin?
I'm a little unclear what this specific question is, but I'll try to answer what I think you asked. So I am a proponent of local accountability and decision-making. I think that's important. I think the unification that Peter talked about with the Act 46 has offered a lot of potential creative solutions, one of which I'd like to highlight, and I know enough to be dangerous on this one, but in one of the Addison Rutland districts that includes, I believe it's Leicester and Whiting, I'm kind of looking to Peter on this, they decided to keep one of the schools to be a K-6 school and the other school is going to be a child care center. So that's actually going to solve a couple of problems. And so I'm really interested to see how that works as a model. So I think there are some great things we can do to support our schools and our children.
Andrew brought up a great thing that I learned when I got into the legislature, which is Addison County is actually very unique in the way that we're sort of the model public school district. There are a lot of different opportunities out there they're not equal. And so we learned about high schools with, within 10 minutes, 3 high schools within 10 minutes of each other with 20 kids in each one. So I think the opportunity to unify and provide kids access to the education they need is a really important part of Act 46. And there's a lot going on out there in the landscape in Vermont that we're not aware of here in Addison County. If you sometimes scratch your head about what's happening, it's because our school districts are all really different. So I did support it.
Barbara?
Yes, I think what we need to step back and look at is what is best for the children. And I think, in Shoreham, it was definitely best for the children to be able to do the school consolidation. They have so many more services than they do now. But I also understand, for towns like Orwell, giving up that control, that local control, and they were, doing lots of things for their kids in the school system. So there is a provision where they can submit a plan. With that said, though, we always have to focus on the children and make sure that it's not, what's best for the parents, but what's best for the children. It's hard. One thought I had, and it came from the Whiting School example of being a daycare, is what if in the future with our schools, we don't close the schools, we actually limit the schools to kindergarten to the 3rd grade and open up the rest of the room for a daycare center.
Okay, let's move on to, our timekeeper has lost their clock, and so she's using a red sheet.
We're moving to a new
So let's move on to the Senate candidates and start with Paul.
Okay, so Act 46 is the law, and a lot of debate, a lot of discussion, and I think it's important that we give that process time in order to see if it delivers what it was intended to do, and that was cost savings. There is another town in our district, and it's called Huntington. It's a long way away from here, but it's one of the Addison district towns. Like Orwell, they had successive town votes and voted down the idea of consolidation. So we do have to ask ourselves, in a system that was designed with a townwide vote, what happens when the citizens say no?
Ruth?
I, along with Peter Conlin, was one of the leaders in the effort here in ACSD to unify our school boards. And I was supportive of that process and think it works really well for our schools. And I also learned a lot through that process, and I want to make sure that whatever we do, we remain student-focused, financially sustainable, and equitable for all of our students. And we also want to maintain local engagement. People are incredibly passionate about their schools, and they're really important for our small towns in Vermont. So we want to make sure that whatever happens going forward, we maintain local engagement in the process and find creative solutions that work for our towns and our schools and our students. Making sure that we do it in a timeline and in a way that makes sense. We did just go through a huge amount of change in our schools and in our school financing, and I believe we need to let that settle and see how it works and maintain engagement. Thank you.
Move to,
She's the content.
Okay, we're back online.
If elected, I will work to repeal Act 46. I think Montpelier is trying to centralize too much control. To Ruth's point of local engagement, if Montpelier controls education, local engagement will naturally fall off. I think it would fall off less because it's education, and education is something we're very passionate about for our children. But nevertheless, having that control centralized in Montpelier is the wrong way to go. And it is the antithesis of Vermont values of local engagement, local control, individuality, and working the very best we can to provide our children with the tangible benefits of that community.
Peter?
So just as Airbnb and Uber has changed the face of two different industries, I see internet, the iPhone, and computers drastically changing how education is done in the future. And if we continue to make larger and larger entities out of our school systems, I don't see how it's going to stay responsive to the individual's needs, and they will go elsewhere. If we want to keep public education relevant, I see that we have to increase flexibility, increase local control, and increase what the individual can get out of it. Right now, it's people's right to go elsewhere. Not as many are able to do that. My family made the sacrifice to give me a different education. I want to see more children being able to have more opportunities like I did.
Chris?
So Act 46 was passed, and the primary driver of it is to provide a fair and high-quality education for every child in the state, no matter where they live. So it's all about educational quality and providing for students. There was speculation that it might save money, but that was not the selling point for Act 46. So we'll have to see how that plays out. There is a provision, and in some cases that quality might be enhanced by combining schools, other times not. One of the important provisions in Act 46 that led me to support it is so-called alternative structures. Towns might decide for themselves, like perhaps Orwell or perhaps Huntington, that their school system worked very well for them and they didn't want to change the structure. So Act 46 tries to respectfully balance local control and some statewide organization. We have to be sensitive to how towns shape their own future.
Very.
I agree that Act 46 was based on proper intent, and I think it's evolving. We have to wait to see where it will end up. It needs some time. I've been very sensitive talking to the folks in Orwell and Huntington, but when you listen to their concerns, I feel they can be worked out. I don't want to minimize their concerns, but I think the overall intent and our goals are pretty good, and I think we can get through this, and we're going to be better off for it.
Thank you. Another question. Come right up. It makes great TV if you're where the camera can see you.
Great, I'm Amy Mason from Waybridge. I think I'm asking a question that's on the minds of a lot of people right now, which is after the Supreme Court decision, the decision regarding the Supreme Court of last week. Women's rights are under threat right now. And so I'd really like to know specifically where each of you stand on the right to choose, reproductive freedom, and what you would be willing to do to fight for it in case things go the way that some of us are fearing they might.
Okay, should we start with Marie down that end?
Yeah, this is having to make that kind of decision would be the hardest decision probably any individual would ever have to make. And there's no way that there's a politician that should be involved or a law that should be involved in making that decision. So I guess I'd say I'm pro-choice. I'm pro-life, but I'd be pro-choice.
And Chris?
So throughout my legislative career, I've always supported full funding for all programs supporting women and women's health, as a matter of fact, health even more broadly. I think it's essential that we, Vermont, be particularly vigilant given the backsliding that's going on at the national level, and make sure that there's always good access to health care that always provides for reproductive freedom. I'm proud of the endorsement of Planned Parenthood of Northern New England and Senator Leahy, who was standing strong during the Kavanaugh hearings, speaking up on behalf of women across the United States.
Peter?
I believe that government's there to protect life, all life, especially those that can't speak up for themselves, which is why I am pro-life.
And Archie?
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You cannot have liberty nor the pursuit of happiness if you do not have life. And I believe that life starts at conception, and I believe that to call it a choice is wrong when you're taking a life. I'm definitely pro-life.
Ruth?
Amy, thank you so much for that question. Many of us around the country, especially women, have been deeply upset over the last few weeks to see women being ignored and their voices and their stories being ignored so much on the national level by powerful and prestigious white men. I am pro-choice. I am a former staffer from Planned Parenthood, and I have been endorsed by Planned Parenthood. I went to my first pro-choice march when I was 12 years old with my mother and my sister, and I would do everything I can to defend the right of women to choose what to do with their body and what kind of health care that they would like to access. Thank you.
And Paul?
I'm solidly pro-choice, and I do not like the idea of government intervention in the most important decisions that people, especially women, make with their doctors, healthcare providers. It's just not a good thing. Politicians don't work well in that arena. People should work with their healthcare providers and make the decisions they want.
Peter?
100% pro-choice and 100% supportive of family planning and solid access to it.
Terry?
As a Knights of Columbus and a Catholic, I'm pro-life.
Thank you. Robin?
I absolutely support a woman's right to choose. I was also endorsed by Planned Parenthood, and I will do everything in my power to make sure that we continue to have our rights that we deserve.
Amy?
And on the same page with Robin on this one, I'm absolutely pro-choice, and I'll do everything I can to support continued access to reproductive health services. I'm also pro-woman, and I think we need to remember that we are supporting families and children as well with a lot of the policies that we support, like paid family leave and a minimum wage, so just keep that in mind as well.
And Margaret?
Yes, I was going to say, it's pro-woman that we need to be focused on, and not just pro-choice. Because when we look around at what's been happening most recently, it's scary. And there is no way that a bunch of white-haired old men should have any say over what a woman does with her body. End of story.
Thank you. Is there another question from the audience?
Vermont incarcerates black people at 11 times the rate that it incarcerates white people. We have the third worst racial disparity rate in the nation.
Just a reminder that during the same time constraints as.
No worries.
As that.
And your name?
How can Montpelier address the systemic racism that leads to our incarcerating people of color at these unacceptable rates and leads our police officers, including right here in Middlebury, to pull over and search black drivers at 4 times the rate they do white drivers?
Okay, we'll start with Barbara.
Okay, there was a question there?
So,
How can Montpelier address this problem?
excellent question. And I think we have to start, not just with the police force, we have to start with us. I think we have to go back to, when we're small in school, we all have biases. And we have to be educated and pointed out what our biases are. Because I grew up in a home that my dad was very racist. I went through work and we did have bias training. And it was the best thing in the world because it made me aware of the things that I do that could be, something that I don't intend to do, but it's prejudice, right? It's bias. So the more that we educate all of us, I think the better that we will be so that when kids grow up and become police officers, that we maybe can start to get away from this horrific problem that we have when it comes to race.
Amy.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I was shocked when our colleague Kyan Morris chose to step down during the off session of this year, and I'm ashamed that I didn't know more about what was happening to her, and it didn't help her more than I could have. I think Barb is right on. This is a societal problem. It's not just with the police. We are at a moment of transition. We're daylighting the issue, which is fabulous that we got the question. We need to keep talking about it to address it. And I know in the State House we do get implicit bias training, and I'm open to ideas for how we can do this, but we absolutely need to address it.
Robin?
Thank you. I agree with what has been said by Amy and by Barb. The governor did sign S5 creating Act 9 in the special session, which was to mitigate systemic racism across all state governments. So there is something that is being started. That's just a start. I mean, this is such a complex topic and involves so many people. And so I suggest that we all think about this. And to me, I find it interesting to note that resistance to racism is an important feature of racism itself and systemic racism. And so one of the first critical steps we need to take is to be able to acknowledge that racism exists in Vermont. We may be an almost all-white state, one of the whitest states in the country, but that doesn't mean that we don't have racism. That's not the definition. We have to acknowledge it exists and talk as communities and individuals about what we're going to do about it. I do recommend you read Driving While Black and Brown in Vermont, which was put out by UVM professors, I believe, and read the bill. So there's much work to be done, but we have to start by acknowledging it exists.
Terry?
I don't think that Montpelier can legislate tolerance. That's something that we need to work on locally and with our neighbors, with our friends, family. There's laws against that kind of intolerance already, so another law is probably not going to change the whole fact.
Peter?
I would agree with Terry that we can't legislate awareness and anti-bias. We all need to be aware of our personal biases and check them. But from a legislative level, we also need to continue to promote anti-bias legislation, as well as support effective anti-bias training in our police department.
Paul?
So I agree with everything that's been said before. Racism is an abhorrent thing, and it is systemic. And I was glad to hear the question. I did not know. I'm embarrassed to say I did not know that Vermont incarcerated, did I get this right, 4 times as many people of race?
11 times.
11 times. I didn't know that. And one of the benefits of a campaign is that we bring out these issues. And thank you. I'm learning something.
Bruce?
Thanks, Dave, for this question. When I was a school board member last year, I urged our school board to create a task force on racism, bias, and discrimination in our schools here in ACSD. And I did so because I heard from multiple parents and students about the racism that happens here in our schools and in our community. Those of us who live in East Middlebury remember the flying of the Confederate flags in our community directly after the incidences in Virginia. I think we as white people need to do our part to help solve this problem and admit that racism exists in Vermont and be part of the solution. And part of the solution is to actually listen to people of color about their stories of racism. I'm good friends with Kaya Morris. I was aware of what was going on with her, and she's fought really hard to make her life better, even though it's been hard. We are all white up here. We need to elect more people of color. We need to hire more people of color, and we have to honor and promote diversity in our state and make it a more welcoming place for people of color. Thank you.
Archie?
This is a really good question, and I thank you for asking it. I'll start with the general remark that libertarianism stands against a collective ideal, and there's no more ugly a form of collectivism than racism. I would also like to point out to everyone here tonight that you may have much more power to combat this problem than you realize. Our founding fathers instituted within the Bill of Rights the necessity for a jury trial to convict someone. And most people are not aware that if you're on a jury, the jury has the authority to judge not merely the facts of the case, but also the law and the justice of the case. And if they do not believe it suits justice, they can refuse to convict. So please carry that forward if you find any unjust cases that you might end up on, because you could be that person's salvation. You could help actually bring their life back into balance.
Peter?
I find that statistic interesting for a state that's heavily white and heavily Democrat in political leaning. So it tells me that it's not a party's problem, it's a heart problem. Can Montpelier do something about a heart problem? Only the individual can take care of themselves. So that's each one of our responsibility. What can Montpelier do? It's important that our courts remain convicting and prosecuting based on law and hard facts. If they don't do that, then it doesn't matter what color you are or what gender you are or any of the other things that may identify us in a different way. Nobody's liberty is safe if the courts are not following through on hard evidence. So I'm a big proponent of making sure that people are convicted on evidence, even if it's outside of court, even if it's bureaucracies coming and telling you how to run your life. They need evidence before they're going to tell you to change.
Chris?
I think there's really 3 things that we can do to address. One is the systemic racism bill that we have. It's only a beginning, it's not a complete answer, but from courts and government itself through police, we have to be following the data and making sure that we actually assess ourselves, measure ourselves, and hold ourselves up to a mirror that lets us evaluate whether or not we're actually performing with bias or not, and make that improvement. Curriculums, school curriculums need to be changed. This hasn't been part of how it was a part of school when I was there, and I think there have been movements to bring this sort of awareness into the school classroom, because that's where most of us really get socialized, K through 12. And then the last thing is that when we're out and about, each of us has the opportunity, when we witness anything, to speak up and speak out against any kind of racism in front of us.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for your questions. Is there another person who would like to give a final question? Oh, Marie, I'm sorry. I couldn't see you down there.
This has been a good dialogue. Everyone has said something important and something that we have to become so much better at recognizing. That big family I told you about, I mean, we come in all colors and all religions and different ethnicities. One of my relatives who grew up in the Northeast has moved down to Florida, and she's told me that she likes being with around people that look like her. So I'm very sensitive to it. And I can't agree more that it's got to be in our early curriculums so that we are aware of these prejudices and we can knock them down early.
Okay, thank you, Marie. Sorry to miss you at the end. So we have one more question. Go right ahead.
So in Middlebury Middle School, art, I believe, was cut slightly. I don't know if it was fully cut, but I believe it was due to money and what they believed could have been cut so that we didn't have to spend as much money. And so I'd just like to know which subjects would you feel okay with cutting because of economics?
Okay, would you like to attempt that from this end?
Sure.
Since we do have tight budgets.
Yes, absolutely.
And taxes are a problem.
So thank you for asking that question. I really appreciate that. It's hard, right? When you have a fixed budget and you're trying to figure out how to make that money go. But I really do believe that the more well-rounded an education is, which includes art, which includes even something like shop. I've gotten a lot of feedback that we really need shop back in the schools. I think we have to really take a look at what we are really cutting. I wouldn't be willing to cut anything right now unless we could come up with really some creative ways on how we might be able to fund it and not assume that, this is just something that should be on the chopping block. I would want to work really hard to make sure that there's no alternative. But I think something like music, something like art, something like even shop, it's as important as math, which is, the subject that I enjoy.
Amy?
It's kind of tough sledding going after Barb. She's very thorough. What she said. I think that's how I feel. I feel like access to art is critical and I wouldn't cut it. Really, I would hope under any circumstances. And I would include foreign languages, and I think having a diverse curriculum, particularly in middle school, is really important to our students' future.
Robin?
Yeah, I agree. I think that, kids all learn different ways and they are attracted to different things, and so it's really important to have lots of things that are available. I wasn't great in art myself, but my sister was, and it made a huge difference in her life, and now she paints watercolors. So I think it's really important that we offer a variety of things so kids have an opportunity to explore and see what they're good at. It builds self-esteem, it creates opportunities for them in their future. So it's a much bigger conversation about how can we, really the question is how can we make sure we have all the things that we need so that the kids have those opportunities to learn.
Terry?
Just from personal experience from school, I would cut history. Because I did not like it. And now you can look up anything you want on Google. And if you watch Jeopardy, you'll know everything you need to know.
Thank you, Terry.
I'm not sure we're ready to adopt that curriculum. I think that the challenge we face in Vermont is the same challenge that's being faced in a lot of rural America, is that we have far fewer kids than we did 20 years ago. and we still have the same number of schools for the most part, and largely the same number of adults working in them. And so where to cut becomes a big challenge, and I think that rather than talking about cutting subjects, what we need to talk about is how can we teach what kids need to know when we have fewer students and ultimately fewer people doing the teaching. So in fact, I don't like to see subjects cut. Sometimes it's necessary because there are fewer students interested in them. But we are needing to sort of have a curriculum where different subjects are taught across disciplines and not just necessarily in their own unique area, so that history and math come together, so that art and social studies come together.
Thank you, Peter. For the Senate candidates, we'll start with Marie.
I am so terribly proud of you for asking that question. And if I was on the school board, and you came, and we had to cut something like art, and you came to the school board and said that, I would melt and I would just find a way. But that's what's going to make a difference. I'm so proud of you. I'm hoping that some of the benefits of consolidation will help alleviate some of the stress, right, in this cutting. But yeah, budgets are hard. I mean, we have a finite number of dollars, and we want to do so much. And we keep asking teachers to do more and more and more and more. They have to take care of hunger, and they have to take care of social issues, and maybe the family's got other mental health issues. So, it's a very complicated pie and a very difficult thing, but certainly worth dialogue.
Chris?
So as a former teacher and someone who loves school, I'm leaning towards whatever creative solutions we can find that allow us to expand the curriculum and keep all the classes in. So if I think about foreign language and theater and sports and shop, these all seem like part of being a well-rounded person, and I would look for opportunities to keep all those things in the curriculum. It may be that some things are combined, and one of the things we've actually seen lately, it's only a piece of the puzzle, is that when we have specialized instruction, like maybe it's foreign language, with high-speed internet, we're starting to have teachers who are great at, they're fluent in French, but they're teaching the kids on 4 different locations, a classroom in front of them and 3 different satellites. So there are ways to use, Peter was talking about this earlier, modern technology. You don't always have to be physically present in order to offer an enriched curriculum that draws on teachers in an entire district or an entire state.
Thank you, Peter.
Somebody who did not necessarily excel to the degree that all children do in the traditional academics, I can sympathize with students who want different ways of learning. And that goes back to why I want to see more options for more children. I think you should be able to work that out with your teacher, frankly, as to how you are taught, and not have to go before a large board, or heaven forbid, have to come to Montpelier to go before a House or Senate committee because so many standards have come down. One thing that I really think we need to be sure that we have down is that education is not, when you get done graduating at 12, it's not the end of education, that should be the beginning. K through 12 should be giving you the resources to keep learning. That's what my education did. I struggled with it, but I have taught myself and worked to keep educating myself and to catch up to all the other students who excel much better at the things that I didn't.
Thank you. Archie?
I'm absolutely thrilled to be part of a community where a young man like this can participate, and I thank him for the question. And we can all see he has a great career in civics ahead of him, and that career depends on subjects like art and music and math, and really education is holistic. If you cut any particular subject, you may as well be robbing the child, and that's not what we want to do. We need to look at efficiencies within the school, whether it's, how to maintain the building better with fewer resources, using high technology better, using our computer technology infrastructure better, but cutting subjects is not something I would ever want to do.
Ruth?
Thanks for the question, Annan. I do want to say, though, I don't think you're correct. We did not reduce art at the middle school, so I'm going to have to talk to your dad about that one. We actually expanded art at Mums because kids now have it for 1/3 of the year instead of 1/4 of the year. We also added general music education, so kids actually have to take more art than they did before. So that's the good news. The other thing I would say is that when I have worked on education budgets, and I've done many education budgets throughout my career, I always try to focus on what can we do to protect the academic core? What can we do to make sure that we're not cutting the things that we're teaching our students and our kids? I did this at Middlebury College when we had to cut the budget there during a financial crisis. I did that always as a school board member. I don't want to cut opportunities for kids, and I especially don't want to cut art. My kids, there are days when they don't want to go to school except for that they want to go to art class. So art is incredibly important. I would never cut art from our schools, and my time is out. Thank you.
And Pete and Paul.
So, history. It's a great subject, and when you get into it, you are going to run into an era that's called the Renaissance. It was a fabulous time in human history. Art, science, commerce were exploding, were just being liberalized, and it was a wonderful, amazing time. And art from that era has changed art forever. Most people think of me as a business person. I am also an artist, and I would love to show you my work. I'd love to show any of you my work. And I did get to have art classes when I was in school, when I was young, and that stuck with me right to this day. So.
Thank you very much for the question and the answers that gave us a really great special insight into each of our candidates for office in Addison County. We're very pleased and very happy to have all of these candidates running for seats for our legislature, because whomever gets there, whomever you choose to vote for, will be the right person for you. It's time now for the wrap up, and each of you has a 1-minute chance to wrap up in any which way you want. And yes.
I don't want to take my minute, but there's some really big issues that we didn't get to talk about, such as agriculture, water quality, climate change. We all are writing essays, at least the Senate candidates, sorry, House candidates, but essays that are appearing and have appeared in the Addison Independent, so you can really get our views. I think they're really important issues. I just want to make sure, and if you look on our websites, probably that our essays are posted there. I know they are in ours. Sorry.
Thank you, Marie, and I do hope that you all read all of those essays and get more educated and watch television, as we have our third candidates forum next week. We'll get to query these same 6 Senate candidates again a third time, so we should really know what they stand for by the time we're done with that, and we urge you to watch those programs on television and also come and ask questions. But we're at that time to try to close up, and we need each of you to give a 1-minute summation of whatever it is you want to do and talk about to close up our program, and we'll start with Peter Kahn.
I'm just getting prepared to write my notes down. Vermont's never been an easy or lucrative place to live. But there's always been the sacrifice you make for that sort of lifestyle has always been rewarded with living in a beautiful state, a good quality of life, and being surrounded by people who take equal pride in our state. But it's gotten, over the last few years, it's gotten a little bit harder. Wages haven't really kept pace with the cost of living, especially health care and housing. At the same time, demand for vital services to make a good quality of life, mental health services, and affordable child care, the demand for that continues to increase. So I look forward to returning to Montpelier to work on a lot of these issues so that we can make Vermont just a little bit easier to live in. Not so easy that we get, millions of people moving here, but back to a time when we could look at it as a place to live out our years.
Terry?
The last two sessions, I've supported the governor's mandate to no increase in taxes and fees. I think it's a worthy thing to try to do. We may not be able to sustain that kind of thing, but it's just, the state is no different than your own budget that you run your house with. If you don't have that income for it, you need to make cuts somewhere. If you want something different, then possibly you're going to have to give up something else. A couple of things that I would like to see next session is cleanup of the city's water systems. I know Burlington has a $300 fee on their voting record this November, so hopefully that will help there. I'm out.
Robin.
Okay. Thank you all for coming. I want a Vermont and an economy that works for all of us, not just a select few. A Vermont where our families and communities can thrive and where the Vermont dream is accessible to everyone, not just a few people. Every Vermonter should have the opportunity to earn a livable wage, receive high-quality, affordable health care, get a great education, live in a clean, healthy environment, and retire with security. Every Vermonter should get a fair shot, contribute their fair share, and play by the same set of rules. And that's what I'm going to work for in Montpelier.
Thank you. Amy?
Vermonters are engaged in changing our economy to promote creative entrepreneurism, fair wages for workers, integrating the protection of natural systems into how we do business, and preparing our young people for the jobs that are here. The recent announcements that Amazon is going to raise its minimum wage to $15 per hour and that ExxonMobil is going to start funding a campaign for a price on carbon are two powerful examples of how what we talk about at the state level matters to the national dialogue. I'm excited to go back to Montpelier to continue work on healthcare, climate change, environmental protection, and economic development. I love connecting Vermonters to Montpelier and working collaboratively on our challenges and goals. Thank you for coming out this evening and for your past support.
And Barbara?
Doing nothing about a problem is no longer acceptable. We must work together to address the issues that our rural families and businesses are facing. We must come up with long-term solutions, such as universal primary care, that actually solve the problem instead of applying yet another Band-Aid to the wound. Spending money on the symptoms without solving a problem is fiscally irresponsible. As your legislator, I will actively seek out your concerns and opinions to ensure that I am representing the district and not solely my own interests. Before voting on proposed legislation, I will use my 36 years of business experience to drill down on financial data to ensure that it is accurate, reasonable, and does not include hidden costs. I will work hard to understand who a proposed bill helps and who the bill might hurt. I will be accountable to you and take responsibility for my decisions. I will be your strong voice in Montpelier.
And we'll move to the Senate candidates. Paul.
Thank you. So one of the interesting things about this process, this thing we call a campaign, this thing that's called a race of candidates, throughout these forums and in other discussions, there's been a lot more agreement about the really big issues facing Vermont than there has been disagreement over them. Almost all Vermonters agree about the really big issues. The difference, of course, is how we're going to approach it, how we're going to apply where government is good at doing things and where government is not good at doing things. One of the things we hear is this, we hear during the campaign is about affordability, is about the ability to live comfortably. And there are two parts of that. There's what you earn and there's what you spend. And we have to be careful in Montpelier not to increase so much what we spend.
Bruce.
Thanks everyone for being here. The issues we face are not simple, and they're not going to be solved by 60-second sound bites. I have a clear record of showing up and getting things done, of working with others to reach compromise and move things forward. I also work hard to bring new voices and perspectives to the table, to ensure our government and our process is inclusive and welcoming. I know these past 2 years have been really difficult for many of us. When our world feels overwhelming, I work harder. As a mother who cares deeply about the future of our world, I am running for office so I can help be part of that solution. Our issues are not simple. How do we solve climate change, end poverty, clean water, save our farms, teach our children, grow our economy, and care for each other? I don't have all the answers, but I have the moral compass, the work ethic, and the deep commitment to public service to help us make progress. And I ask you for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Archie?
Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. We've heard many ideas from multiple candidates with varied points of view. I'm happy to be part of so energetic a contest. It's exciting that Addison County has such a slate of choices. My philosophy of government is simple. Its proper authority is solely to protect individual, inalienable human rights. If you believe, as I do, Montpelier has forgotten its proper role, if you feel, as I do, Montpelier has overstepped its authority and must be reined in, if you hold, as I do, we must end Montpelier's addiction to fiscal insanity, then please send me to the State Senate. I will work for Vermonters. I will work to restore the proper relationship between government and the people. I will work to protect your bank account from those who see it as nothing more than their personal ATM. Thank you. Please vote Archie Flower for State Senate.
Peter?
I'm running to bring a better Vermont for all Vermonters, no matter what may be your gender, your beliefs, your ethnicity, or your age. Also for all the small and big farms, businesses, and all the other organizations and entities found in this county. Most importantly, though, I feel my job would be as a senator to stand up for the smallest minority of all, the individual, and their inalienable rights. We have been overtaxed, overregulated, undertrusted, and underestimated. It is time for government to be more responsible than it has been. If you can identify with these goals and what I've said tonight, then I would appreciate your vote on November 6th.
Chris?
I grew up in a family that expected all of us to be involved in service of some sort. The basic notion, without really being lectured at us, was you're here to make the world a better place while you're here. Participate in your community, give something. And so I had started in my junior high school days volunteering at the hospital. By the time my kids were in school, I was a baseball coach and referee. I ended up on the fire and rescue squad, on the land trust, on United Way. I've been doing these kinds of service work for 40 years. For me, the legislature has been the very same kind of work, service work. So I've had literally tens of thousands of conversations, emails, phone calls over the last decade in order to hear what you're interested in and then help Montpelier move the ball forward, making progress on food and agriculture, on clean water, on clean energy, on strong schools, better health care. My service orientation says listen to people and help them get the community they want.
Anne-Marie?
Okay. I'm running and I want to represent the people who, like me, are scared that Vermont is becoming unaffordable. I'm actually scared of having a representative that doesn't have business experience or ever worked in a private business. I'm scared of having a representative who's increasingly becoming disconnected to the constituents in Addison County. There's so much to acknowledge about what the good work that we're doing here in this county. I'm tired of the rural Vermont being ignored in Montpelier. I'm not pretending to have all the answers, but what I will promise is transparency the way we always have on our farm. I will promise collaboration. I know I will work with everybody that is up in the legislature equally. I promise communication back to my constituencies. And I promise to be informed on every single bill that I will vote on. I'm not a politician, I'm an engaged Vermont citizen, willing to represent you if you have me.
And thank you, each and every one of you, for that. Thank you for your commitment to run. We live in a very unique place in Addison County. That place where we can speak one-on-one with any member of our citizen legislature, and also speak one-on-one with any candidate at any time. In fact, I'd love to engage you, and if you stay after, I'm sure they will engage you in conversation that's continuing. Thank you for coming out tonight and putting democracy in action. And thanks again to our sponsors, the Addison County Economic Development Corporation, the Addison County Chamber of Commerce, the Addison Independent, Vermont Gas for the food, and Middlebury Community Television for being here and rebroadcasting this a number of times over the next couple of weeks. Remember to vote on November 6th. Thank you.